You know, now we're going to look at chapter 3 in the book. If you go to your PDF, if you want to follow along, or later on you can. And you'll notice that there's gray sections in the book. And I do that because I put a lot of the key elements in gray little boxes where you can go back through the book later and just do a cursory, if you will, review of the book. You know, we don't learn these things the first time. We need to repeat them. We need to hear them again and again. And so if you have that, you can go back through and just go through and look for those boxes, and you'll get a good overview of what we've been teaching here. Chapter 3, we want to talk about emotional recognition. Now, we talked earlier about the 3 phases of emotional resilience and that I teach, and that is first, there's recognition. We need to know when we're becoming emotional. So often it's after the fact, right? Oh, why'd I do that, right? But we can learn from that. Don't despair. We can learn by going back to those things we did. We can learn what triggered us. We can learn different responses. So that's okay. But wouldn't it be nice if we learned how to recognize when it's starting to happen? And so this is going to be about recognizing when we're anxious. And, you know, we have the emotional recognition, then the emotional regulation, then emotional relearning, and we'll go through regulation and relearning in a little bit. Now, recognizing our emotional and our anxious sensations, emotions, and feelings is crucial. Now, it's interesting, emotions are really a sensation. The root word of emotion is to move, to move. It comes through our senses. We touch the hot stove, ouch, we move. We see a person coming to us with an angry face and maybe a club in their hand, we want to run or move, right? We react because we recognize something. And so our brain has set up a bunch of different things, parameters, if we will. It's been primed to where it will react to certain cues. And this is what we call predictive coding. The brain has coded different kinds of things that we need to be careful about. And so there's 2 ways, there's 2 processes that trigger anxiety. One is the cortex. Remember, we're talking about the hand model. The outer layer of our brain is the cortex, and specifically the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of our brain. What we think can cause a lot of times anxiety. And so when I notice something and then I start thinking, well, he doesn't like me, or gee, he's mad at me, or what did I say? You know, that all causes us then to be anxious. And a lot of times we make out of these assumptions, we start assuming things. We have social anxiety. We don't go to school. Why? Because people are going to laugh at me. We're thinking, right? The other type is the amygdala-based, and that results from the sensation or an embodied belief, if you will. Our body knows, our senses know. It's been primed in us of what we need to watch out for, and so we've been conditioned. There's been associations made, and our amygdala watches, and when it sees what it thinks is dangerous, it will flip its lid, remember? And so when we talk about regulation a little bit, we want to regulate it back down where we can use both the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So there's amygdala-based anxiety, and it's what we perceive that comes in, and then our amygdala reacts. Now, if we were talking about, cortex-based learning, a lot of it is, the language that we change that is using our language, right? The language is the words that we say. I felt this way, gee, I need to correct that thought. It's not true. And we'll get into some of that. We'll talk about belief exchange in a little while, where we can change beliefs, and that can reduce our anxiety. But we're talking right now about the amygdala-based. And in the amygdala-based, it's experiential knowledge. It's associations. And so therefore, if a dog bit me, all dogs are bad, I have to retrain that. Maybe it's the little dog with black and white spots. I might have to even retrain that to where I know it was that specific dog. and that don't have to generalize about other dogs. And a lot of our anxiety is like that. Now, in anxiety, we need to know both. I mean, we need to change anxiety both through the cortex, through what we believe rationally, and what we believe emotionally. And so we need to train both. In their book, Rewire Your Anxious Brain, Catherine Pittman and Elizabeth Caro say this. They say until recently, treatments for anxiety were less likely to take the amygdala pathway into consideration. The amygdala is small, but it's made up of thousands of circuits of cells dedicated to different purposes. These circuits influence love, bonding, sexual behavior, anger, aggression, and fear. The role of the amygdala is to attach emotional significance to situations or objects and to form emotional memories. Those emotions and emotional memories can be positive or negative, and that's what then in turn triggers us, right? If we have a negative emotional memory, it's going to trigger us. Don't touch the hot stove. If you were beat up by a person that had a red leather coat, which isn't that common, and it was a dark night in an alley, windy and everything. Someday, 20 years later, you're in an alley, it's windy, it's dark, and a guy's walking up toward you in a red leather coat. Trust me, you'll be anxious for a second. I remember a woman that was taking her child and going to teach it how to ride its bike. So it had training wheels. The daughter was around 3 years old. She went to do it. She had the bike. She goes to get the girl, and then all of a sudden she had like a panic attack. She felt all anxious, and her chin was sore, and she didn't know what was going on. So she said, "Not now, honey." And so she went inside and calmed down. She talked to her mother on the phone and said, "Mom, I don't know what happened. I went to put little Sally on the bike, and all of a sudden I had a panic attack. I was real anxious. I couldn't do it, and my chin was sore." And she goes, "Well, honey, can't you remember? When you were 3 years old, your father and I, we put you on a bike, and you went down the driveway, and you fell, and you cut your chin." Now, isn't that interesting? The amygdala remembered that. And that's why a lot of times it's amazing that we become more anxious in our early 20s and maybe 30s when we're starting to rear children, because the children remind us of our own childhood. It's an interesting phenomena. So emotions start as sensations. They start as sensations, and I feel anxious, okay? I don't know, something's bothering me, I feel it, right? And it comes through our body, our sensations, what we see. And recognizing, our emotions come from sensations then will help us, and where we can change these things. There's many ways to react to this emotional pain. And what do I mean by that? It is pain. The same part of our brain, when it registers a paper cut, you know how they hurt, that same part of the brain registers emotional pain. If I was hurt by somebody, they ridiculed me, I was embarrassed, then the next time I'm with that person, the brain is going to see them, and if it made the association, if that person constantly humiliated me, the association is them with humiliation, with emotional pain, that brain is going to pick up that signal, and I'm going to react. Now, it may be because I've been shamed, I'll put on the posture of shame. It may be I'll get angry. It may be that I want to leave. But somehow I'm anxious and I'm reacting different ways. Why? Because there was an association made. It started and it came through. As soon as I saw that look on their face, as soon as I saw them, I made an association. How many things you're anxious about start with associations? Ask yourself. Start recording when you get anxious and ask yourself, what was the situation? What was I reacting to? What was I feeling? What do I feel was true? If you can start doing that and being your own detective, you're going to come a long way in this program. You need to be your own detective where you can start seeing what you're reacting to. Now, it's not just what we're reacting to, it's how we're reacting. And we can change our emotions as we start to realize how we're reacting. Now, there's different ways that we react. The traditional ways that we talked about are flight, fight, and freeze. I've added fix because I found I'm a person that tended to freeze, and you can't do well with freezing all the time. So I learned to start to be a people pleaser. I learned to placate. I learned to make it right. I subjugate myself. I call that fixing, and many of us react that way to anxiety. Some of us fight. We get angry, or we rebel, we yell. Maybe we hurt other people. We control the situation. We dominate. Maybe we get critical, or we're passive aggressive. Other people, it's more like a flight. We escape, right? We daydream. Maybe we're hooked into an addiction that numbs us out. We avoid the situation. We avoid thinking about it. We push people away. Maybe we get sick, and that's the body's way of helping us avoid situations. We avoid conflict. We become, real passive. And for some of us, it's more of a freeze. And that's, like phobias, right? We just can't bear the thought of being around it. We panic. We get stuck. We detach ourselves from reality, perhaps, or we dissociate through daydreaming or just not being there in a way. And so we need to recognize our anxious thoughts and beliefs and the way we're reacting if we're going to change it. If we don't recognize, then we can't change. We need to be aware of our anxious thoughts. We need to be aware, and again, I ask you, to be your own detective. You can either think in the past of how you reacted when you overreacted to a situation with anxiety, or you can take track of what's happening in the days and weeks to come. But you need to analyze and ask yourself, what happened? What was I reacting to? How did I react? What was I feeling? What do I feel was true? What was I thinking? What do I feel was true? And then the $1 million question is, what's the truth? Because that's where the change will come.